What's up everybody, this is Ven, here to welcome you to another M.O.C Spotlight where we take apart what you build. For today's episode, we'll be going over Babylon, the Mage, created and posted to our message boards by a username Poharu. And of course, before we get started, let me remind you of my method of reviewing, which involves a point system that is based on 3 fundamental attributes: the overall appearance of the M.O.C, the build of the M.O.C itself, and the concept and ideas behind the M.O.C's creation. Each quality will mount up to 5 points, leading up to a final score that will be determined at the end of the episode. And please remember that this is all based on my opinion. Now let's get this started. Now right off the bat, first glance, gotta say, this looks like a pretty cool character design we got here. He's got these really cool shoulder pad things. He's got some proper proportions. He's got a pretty great color scheme, you know, neon green, working surprisingly well with the metro blue and the white, which I feel is well demonstrated by the shoulders. I do think that this mod could use a little more of this neon green in several places just for the sake of consistency. And well, as it is right now, I do think that the placement of these neon green parts could be a bit better. For instance, if you look at the lower legs, you'll see that there's a little bit of neon green here. And here's my thing, I don't think the neon green should be placed over white. I think it should be placed over the dark blue / black, like how it was done with the shoulders, just because it has that nice contrast, you know, it really pops out. And the placement of the neon green on the legs doesn't really have that same effect. But anywho, back to the more interesting stuff. This guy's got loads of detail all over the place. You know, like everything looks so complex. Like, look at this chest. This is a really cool design for the chest, with his dark blue armored plating effect here on his massive pecs. And this may sound a little weird, but I also really like the feet as well. They're not your average bionicle foot mold. No, these are completely custom and they look really good. And then I'd say that the real highlight of this M.O.C would be the staff. Because really, it's the one thing that gives this M.O.C some character. And it's also a really unique design. Basic and simple, and well, not really all that fitting with the rest of the M.O.C. But still pretty okay looking. But I definitely would have appreciated something a little bit more in-depth. And well, a couple of other things that I have to complain about. I don't really like how thin the waist is. That looks a little odd. Like, it doesn't really flow with the rest of the M.O.C and its volume, like how everything's so bulky and oh so masculine. Well, almost everything. The thighs kind of have this problem too, and they look even more awkward. I'm not a big fan of the leg design overall, but it is mostly because of the thighs. Aside from these things, everything looks pretty okay. Now, the build of this M.O.C looks pretty well stabilized, and that's really important considering how posable this M.O.C is thanks to all of its articulation. I mean, look, it's one of those M.O.Cs that even has articulated fingers. Isn't that crazy? He can quite literally hold his own weapon, or I mean staff thing. It's also really impressive seeing how sturdy this M.O.C looks, since it's a purely custom build, and a rather complex one at that. It even looks as though there's a custom head design underneath this helmet, which is really neat since it gives it this new eye color that was never available with the actual Glatorian heads, which would normally be used for these type of helmet pieces. I also noticed that this M.O.C utilizes a good bit of system, and this is where things get a little bit dicey. For the most part, I will say that the system is used pretty creatively. Like, a good portion of it is used for cosmetics, but there are some parts of the M.O.C that utilize system as part of the structure, and you'll see this mostly in the lower biceps, I guess, and in the calves. That's what the lower legs are called, right? Calves? Anyway, these are purely made up of system. And it's the system parts that not only make them look so weird, but they also make me a little bit concerned for this M.O.C structure. And if you take a look at the biceps here, look at this. Look at these pieces here on the sides of the bicep. Like, these pieces do not connect like that normally. This is an unorthodox connection, and it makes me nervous. Like, this sort of thing is not supposed to happen. It's not supposed to happen. It's crazy. This is insane. Why would you do this? I'm surprised it hasn't, like, fallen off in any one of these pictures. Like, what is this? Why? I mean, I get it's there for really just aesthetic, but why? This, along with a few other system parts on this M.O.C, really do not look all too secure. So, yeah, gotta take note of that. And speaking of keeping things together, Though I do think that articulated fingers is a nice touch, there doesn't seem to be a way to keep the staff securely locked into these hands. So really, the figure actually needs to have a good grasp over the staff in order to hold it for some sort of pose. And based on my own experience, I know that can be really frickin' annoying. But it is cool to see that it's not completely fixed to the figure and that you could even store it on its back. You know, that's a pretty cool feature right there. So one last thing to note about the M.O.C build I won't really touch upon all too much is that there's a lack of functionality. So, you know, not much else I can praise. It would be nice to see a function on this M.O.C. I think this M.O.C has some room for it. Like maybe the staff could like shoot something, or I don't know. It's whatever. It's not necessary. Just, you know, would have been cool. So conceptually, we have here a character modeled to be some sort of sage. The builder had a backstory that explains that this character is one of 7 sages, purposed with rebuilding Earth in some sort of post-apocalyptic setting. This sage in particular is responsible for bringing life back to the world, hence the name Sage of Life. And he would do so by using his powers to manipulate plant life and create wildlife and that sort of thing. Freaking Captain Planet 2.0. So keeping that in mind, I look at this M.O.C and, you know, I could see that the weapon or staff kind of evokes the sage aspect of the character. And the character itself turned out looking pretty decent. You know, he's a cool looking cyborg dude. But, you know, take away the staff and that's really all I see is just this cool looking cyborg dude. Like, the character himself doesn't really have many details or characteristics that suggest he's some kind of sage. And, you know, traditionally sages are like these sentient beings cloaked in robes or other magical-like clothing, I guess. And this guy looks more fitting to just be some kind of Toa, maybe a Toa of magic or something. So that said, I do think it could use some more features to really communicate that occupation, because so far he does look pretty okay. He could use a little bit of improvement, but there's a lot of untapped potential, and so far this M.O.C seems to be a couple of steps far away from fully achieving the goal of looking like some kind of sage, some kind of magical character with the power over life and such. So that's pretty much all I gotta say. Let's go ahead and move on to the scores and get this all wrapped up now, shall we? So in terms of appearance, this M.O.C receives a 3.5 out of 5. It's a pretty decent looking M.O.C. I do have a couple of problems with it, and I do think some things could be improved, but it's definitely not a bad design. And I think the best part about it is all the detail it has, because that just gives me so much to look at, like the frickin' pecs. And as far as the build goes, I feel that it deserves a 3.5 out of 5. It looks to be a pretty stable custom build overall, but much like the appearance, I do feel like there are some problems with it that should have been touched upon that really would have made this a lot more solidified. And also, it has like no function, so I can't really give it too much praise. And as far as the concept goes, this M.O.C receives a 3 out of 5. I think it's a pretty cool idea. The backstory is intriguing and all, but this M.O.C doesn't seem to be all that there yet. It's a decent looking M.O.C and it's decently built, but again, aside from the staff, I'm not really looking at it as some sort of sage. I just don't really see that sort of character in this design. But at the very least, you do still have a pretty good design. So all in all, we add up the score, and we are left with a final score of 10 out of 15. You did a pretty good job, Poharu, but I do think that the biggest problem with this M.O.C is just all of the untapped potential it has. So I hope you take what I've said into consideration. You don't have to, you could just tell me to screw off and I'll be fine with that too. Either way, congrats for making it onto the M.O.C Spotlight, and I hope to see more out of you. Same goes for you viewers. I gotta tell you all the friggin' time. Please, if you haven't already, post your own creations to our message boards at board.ttvpodcast.com under the LEGO Creations category, because that is my #1 go-to spot for checking out M.O.Cs, searching for really interesting and creative M.O.Cs to throw up on the spotlight. So if you feel like you deserve that kind of recognition, or any sort of recognition at all for your creativity, please take this into consideration. Visit the message boards, do your thing, post your toast, and yeah. I thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.